All right, we're going to go through a progression of factoring so that we can learn how to factor numerous types of equations, quadratic equations, so that we can eventually solve them. But before we do, I want to just review foiling. And so let's say that we are multiplying x plus 2 times x plus 4. We're going to FOIL, which means we're going to multiply the first terms together. X times x gives us x squared. And I'm going to take x times 4, which gives us 4x. And 2 times x gives us 2x. And then 2 times 4 gives us 8. And so when I put these like terms together, I'll have x squared plus 4x and 2x is 6x plus 8. So what I want to do is kind of work in reverse. When we factor, we're going to start with a quadratic equation and we're going to get them into the two factors. So in other words, we're going to start with x squared plus 6x plus 8. And what we want to do is write that so that they're the product of two factors. And so when we do a problem like this, we want to start by trying to figure out what gives us the first two terms in our factors. And so just like here, we got x squared by multiplying the x times the x. I need to find something that gives me x squared, and that has to be x and x. The first two terms give me the x squared. Then I have the 8, and I got the 8 up here by multiplying the 2 times the 4. In other words, the last two terms give me the 8. And so I'm looking for something here and here that when I multiply it together gives me 8. So normally, I know what the answer is now, but normally I could use 8 and 1, 4 and 2, or anything that gives me 8. If I put a 4 and a 2 here, I know that's going to work because I know that my first two terms give me x squared, my last two terms give me 8, and then my middle terms, my inside terms, this is 4x, and my outside terms, x times 2 is 2x, they add together to give me 6x. And so when we factor x squared plus 6x plus 8, we would get x plus 4 times x plus 2. That's all we're going to do this weekend. Eventually, if this is equal to 0 and this is equal to 0, we'll just continue to solve that equation. But for this weekend, we're just factoring those. And so this is example number 1 that I'd like for you to put in your notes. If we move on to example number 2 in your notes. Number 2, I'd like for you to put this down. X squared minus 11x plus 24. And I want to factor that. This is a little bit more difficult because we've had both positives before, and now we have a negative and a positive. And so, but I'm going to do it the same process. Or you can do this a different way if you like one of the ways Mrs. Emi talked to you about, or a way that you've learned before. But here's how I would do this problem. I need something that gives me x squared. So just like before, it's going to be an x and an x. That's the only thing that when I multiply them together gives me x squared. Then I want something, my last two terms, that when I multiply them together gives me 24. And so the only thing that gives me 24, well, there's 24 and 1, there's 12 and 2, there's 8 and 3, there's 6 and 4. But I'm trying to find something that will eventually add up to a negative 11. And so if I try a negative 3 and a negative 8, negative 3 times negative 8 does give me 24. But this is negative 3x. And this is negative 8x, and negative 3x plus negative 8x does give me negative 11x. So when I factor x squared minus 11x plus 24, I will get x minus 3 times x minus 8. Third example, and we're getting more difficult as we go. Third example is x squared minus 14x minus 32. And I think this is more difficult than number 2 because now we have two negative signs to worry about. So I'm going to do it the same process though. I want something here and here that multiplies together to give me x squared. That's going to be x and x. And then I want something here and here that when I multiply it together gives me 32. So I can try things like 32 times 1, although that's not going to give me 14. I could try 16 times 2. I could try 8 times 4. So 16 and 2 looks like it could give me a negative 14 as long as the 16 is negative and the 2 is positive. I know that negative 16 times positive 2 is negative 32. If I check my inside terms, that's negative 16x. If I check my outside terms, that's 2x. And negative 16x plus 2x does give me negative 14x. If I go on to number 4, 2x squared plus 11x plus 12. Now this one is more difficult because they're both positive, but I have an a value that isn't 1. So far on 1, 2, 3, and 4, I just had an x squared here. For number 2, I had an x squared. For number 3, I had an x squared. But now for number 4, I have a 2x squared. And so I want to factor this equation. The difference is, instead of just having an x and an x that gives me an x squared, one of them is going to have to be 2x. Because 2x times x gives me 2x squared. I still want something here and here that when I multiply them together gives me 12. So I could try 12 and 1, I could try 6 and 2, or I can try 4 and 3. So this is going to be a trial and error thing here, because right now there really isn't anything that's going to give me a positive 11, and that's okay, because what I could do is I could try, let's say I start with a 6 and a 2, and let's say I put a 6 here and a 2 here. I know that 6 times 2 does give me 12, and I know that they're both going to be positive because I need a positive 11x, and they have to be the same sign to give me a positive 12. But if I take 6 times x, that's 6x, 2x times 2 is 4x, and 6x plus 4x is 10x, not 11x. So 6 and 2 isn't going to work. I'm going to have to try something else. I could try 2 and 6. Then this would be 2x, and this would be 12x. But again, I don't get 11x. So 6 and 2 probably isn't going to be the two numbers that I'm going to want to work with. I'm going to try 4 and 3. If I try 4 and 3, this is 4x, and this is 3x. 3 times 2x is 6x, but that doesn't give me 11x. So I'm going to switch it around. I'm going to put the 3 here and the 4 here. This is 3x plus 8x, and 3x plus 8x does give me 11x. And so if I factor 2x squared plus 11x plus 12, I will get 2x plus 3 times x plus 4. And this is a little bit more difficult than having an a value that is just 1. Moving on to number 5. Let's say that number 5 looks like this. We're going to start with x minus, or 3x squared minus 16x minus 12. This is about as hard as we're going to get today, because not only does it have an a value that isn't 1, but it has negative signs in it. The process, though, is still going to be the same. I want something here and here that gives me 3x squared. It's going to have to be a 3x and an x. That gives me 3x squared. And then I want something here and here that when I multiply it together gives me negative 12. So I can try 12 and 1, I can try 6 and 2, or I can try 4 and 3 again. And so I'm going to try different numbers that I think might work. Typically, like in the problems that you have in like your textbooks, they will very rarely start with like the 12 and the 1. More than likely it'll be the 6 and the 2 or the 4 and the 3. So I'm going to try with a 6 and a 2 here. If I put a 6 here and a 2 here, one of them is going to have to be negative. Let me just make this sign positive and this sign negative to start with. This is going to be 6x. And 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. And that doesn't give me a negative 16. So I'm going to switch these numbers around and see if it makes a difference if I put the 2 here and the 6 here. Then this would be 2x. 3x times 6 is negative 18x. And 2x and a negative 18x does give me a negative 16x. Let's say that your signs, let's say you made this one positive and this one negative. That this would be negative and this would be positive. So if your sign was the same, I mean, if you had negative 2x plus 18x and you had a positive 16x, you could just simply switch your signs around so that you get this one to be positive and this one to be negative. So anyway, when I factor 3x squared minus 16x minus 12, I'll get 3x plus 2 times x minus 6. Last one we'll do here on the video is just one that's a little different. Let's say we have 4w squared plus 2w. This doesn't have a c value. If it doesn't have a c value, for example, on one like this, I can just factor this by factoring out a common denominator. Like, for example, what number goes into 4 that also goes into 2? And that's a 2. And also, what goes into w squared that also goes into w? And that's w. So if I take 2w times two things that give me these two things, 2 times 2 gives me the 4, and w times w is w squared. And then 2w times 1 gives me 2w. So this one would factor to just 2w times 2w plus 1.